All right, we can probably go ahead and get started. First of all, I'd like to welcome everyone to this conversation. We will be sharing a bit about our upcoming grant cycle, which is focused on our Smart Justice initiative. Before we do that, though, I'd love to just provide some quick introductions for ourselves. My name is Ryan Erickson Kulas. I've been with the Michelson 20mm Foundation for just over 4 years. I'm currently our Director of Programs and Operations, so I work with all of the initiatives to help expand and grow. I also provide oversight for our Spark Grant program, and I'll pass it over to my colleague Kenya so she can introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Kenya Miranda Verdugo, and I am the Smart Justice Program Manager. I've been with 20mm for about almost 11 months now. So this is my first Spark Grant cycle. Very excited to get this going and see all of the interest behind the grants.
Awesome. So a quick agenda for today. We'll start with an overview of our organization. And then from there, we'll transition to discuss the specifics of our Spark Grant program. We'll review what we're looking for when we evaluate. We'll talk about what our focus areas for this cycle are, and then we'll also walk through what the review of the application process entails. From there, we'll highlight some previous Spark Grant awardees so that you all have a better sense of the types of organizations and the types of work that we fund. And then we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. If there are questions that pop up during our conversation, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A. And then again, at the end of this conversation, we'll circle back and be able to answer those. This session is being recorded. And for those of you who have registered, you will get a link to the recording as well as a link to this deck, probably within 48 hours. So our organization is founded and funded by Dr. Gary Michelson. Dr. Michelson is a retired orthopedic surgeon who invented a plethora of medical devices, patented those devices, and made his fortune that way. He started our organization over a decade ago, and it really got its start in the textbook affordability space. Dr. Michelson read a story about students at Santa Ana College who were unable to continue in their educational journey simply because of the high cost of textbooks. At the time, he created a scholarship fund at that school, but it didn't really address the heart of the problem. And so he made the first and largest grant to date of our organization to OpenStax, which creates openly licensed educational materials. Dr. Michelson also has other foundations within the Michelson Philanthropies Network, including Michelson Found Animals, which is an animal welfare organization, and the Michelson Medical Research Foundation. So our mission at 20mm is to move towards a more just world by working with entrepreneurs, change makers, nonprofit leaders to provide solutions and allow all individuals across humanity to reach their full potential. And we primarily focus on educational and economic outcomes for a variety of different populations. I'd like to talk about our 5 different initiatives just to give you a holistic sense of the work that Michelson 20mm does. The first initiative that I'll mention is the Michelson Institute for Intellectual Property. As I mentioned, Dr. Michelson made his fortune in inventing medical devices and then patenting those devices. And so he's very adamant about democratizing intellectual property awareness, educating entrepreneurs, inventors, students about what IP is and how they can capitalize on their own knowledge. We've created a curriculum where schools, professors can adopt into existing classes. There's also an online Udemy course, but really kind of follows in the footsteps of Dr. Michelson wanting to democratize IP education. Another area of our work is our impact investing work. So this is where we take equity positions in for-profit companies. And generally, they are aligned with our kind of mission to make higher education more accessible, to make economic outcomes more accessible for individuals. This Spark Grant cycle is primarily for nonprofit organizations, but this is another aspect of the work that we do. And then I'll quickly mention the 3 other initiatives that we have before we talk about our Smart Justice initiative. We also do work in the student basic needs space. So looking to meet the needs that students have within higher education to allow them to be more successful. So whether that be housing, food insecurity, mental health is becoming an increasing aspect of that work. As I mentioned, open educational resources was kind of where we got our start as a foundation, but looking to expand affordable and equitable instructional materials and learning experiences for students across higher education. And then the last thing that I'll mention is our digital equity initiative. This really sprung out of the COVID-19 pandemic, where students were being asked to work remotely on their courses, but oftentimes the digital divide made that impossible. Maybe it was an issue in regards to access to laptops. Maybe it was an issue around digital literacy or access to high-speed internet. And so we launched that DE initiative in 2020 to sort of help address that issue. And from there, I'll turn it over to my colleague Kenya, who can talk a little bit about our Smart Justice work.
Thank you, Ryan. The Smart Justice Initiative seeks to create innovative pathways towards educational attainment, employment, and economic opportunity for system-impacted communities and people. So this doesn't just assist with incarcerated students or formerly incarcerated students, but we also want to extend those resources and that support to the families affected as well. We do work to increase self-sufficiency and resilience and forge brighter, more prosperous futures amongst communities that are disproportionately impacted by our country's legal system. And we do this through workforce development programs so that they're not just successful, through education, but they're able to continue that success and continue thriving once released, either through education or workforce development opportunities. And if now we're going to talk a little bit about the Spark Grant program overview. Again, this is the Spark Grant program goes across all the programs in 20MM, but these are going to be the specific dates for the Smart Justice cycle. So the vision of the Spark Grant program is to fund highly impactful initiatives that would not be possible if they needed to wait through a traditional grant decision timeline. And the mission is to introduce an innovative, just-in-time grant-making process to meet the urgent needs of organizations aligned with our focus areas, which I will be talking about in a little bit. The commitment is to make decisions on all applications within 6 weeks of our calls for proposals closing. And for the Smart Justice Spark Grant cycle, the funding cycle is going to open on November 21st, so just a couple weeks from now, and it's going to close on December 7th, 2022. So the Spark Grant program is available to United States-based nonprofits. However, for this round of funding, we have decided to focus our impact on organizations that are doing work within California. So organizations whose work does not impact California will be ineligible for this opportunity for this Smart Justice Spark Grant cycle. We do seek to fund efforts that provide scalable solutions that can impact individuals statewide and are not limited to just one particular campus. We do welcome proposals where Michelson Spark Grant funds are part of a larger overall project with multiple funding streams. So we don't have to be the sole funder. We'd also be able to support any other funders that you all have been reaching out to with these proposals.
Thanks, Kenya. The one thing that I'll add as well is we often get proposals coming from educational institutions, which we're certainly open to funding as well. We work with those schools to kind of figure out how to best route dollars. Generally, that is through a school's foundation, but I know that's one question that often comes up in these conversations. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we look at when we evaluate a proposal coming from a partner during our Spark Grant cycle. And there are really kind of 6 dimensions that we evaluate. And we'll go into each of these 6 dimensions, but just very quickly, does it meet baseline criteria? How closely is it aligned with our focus areas? What is the impact of the grant? How is that impact going to be measured? What is the long-term organizational sustainability of the organization that's submitting the project? And then also, what is the scalability of this work? How would it grow? How would it advance? How would it keep going sort of beyond our grant dollars? So our Spark grants are asks of up to $25,000. They can generally will focus on a self-contained milestone, a project. We see generally organizations submitting for projects that will be occurring within a 6 to 1 year time period. Sometimes we'll see organizations submit something that'll be 18 months. Obviously, we're flexible, but with $25,000, generally we don't see anything kind of going beyond 18 months. As Kenya mentioned, we're certainly open to having our dollars combined with other dollars. We also are totally fine with our dollars being used to allocate staff time on a particular project. We don't allow our dollars to be used for any sort of general operating expenses, inventory, et cetera, unless it was something that's kind of specifically designated for the project that you are submitting. And so I'll let Kenya talk a little bit about the focus areas that you would submit a project on for the Spark Grant cycle.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, so like we mentioned, the focus areas do change year by year. So this year specifically, we do want our focus areas to be around programming that supports access to high wage and high growth employment and career opportunities for formerly incarcerated individuals, as well as advancing programming that grows a pipeline for college enrollment of individuals who did not pursue higher education while in prison. So we just want to ensure that they still have educational opportunities at hand upon release. In addition to multi-generational approaches focused on supporting the family unit of justice impacted students. So that includes parents, children, uncle, aunts, cousins, just supportive family members that were there during incarceration and will be supportive after as well. Supporting scalable solutions for soon-to-be or recently released individuals focused on advancing digital literacy skills. And finally, elevating the voices of justice-impacted student leaders to build awareness and educate policymakers on the needed support for this population.
And I'll just jump in super quickly to mention that I think oftentimes we get the question of, if my proposal were to hit multiple of these focus areas, would it, benefit me in some capacity? And I would say not necessarily. You certainly can select multiple focus areas if your project does that work. But I think what we're really looking for are things that, maybe tackle one of those focus areas well, as opposed to maybe 3 of those focus areas not so well.
So continuing on in the dimensions, we already spoke about the baseline criteria and the focus areas alignment. So now talking about the potential impact of the grant, we would like to know how many individuals the grant will impact, the ideal case of what the impact would be on the project. In addition to worst case, what is the impact of the project in a worst case scenario, and how likely it is that the project is successful. Now, the measurability of impact, we'd like to know how effective are the proposed metrics for measuring success for the project, how realistic is the proposed project impact, and the project timeline. Long-term organization sustainability, we'd like to know the current team and partners, the business model, and existing resources and revenue streams for the organization. Finally, the scalability of the project. We support systems level strategies that can create impact at scale and inform public policy. This includes but is not limited to initiatives, partnerships, programs, models, and research whose outcomes will have a regional effect. Again, the California focus.
And I saw a question in the chat just, or in the Q&A, I should say, about that, Kenya, about the California focus from James, asking, is there no room for organizations that are outside of California that are working very intimately in most of these focus areas? We are open to working with organizations outside California. However, their work needs to be impacting California. So maybe there is something that's occurring kind of at the federal level where you're educating policymakers around items that would impact Californians. We would certainly be open to something like that. But again, the project or the work would have to benefit Californians. And then to answer another question, yes, this presentation will be shared with attendees. So moving forward into sort of our process, now that we've talked about what we're looking to evaluate and what our focus areas are. So we will open our portal on November 21st. And it will remain open until December 7th at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. The first and initial item that you will submit is your letter of inquiry, or LOI. We actually have a copy of the LOI as well as the full application on our Spark Grant websites currently, and that's the link right there. So if you go there, you can actually download those. The initial LOI, other than some biographical information about the organization, is really focused on a 500-word abstract. That abstract is really the meat and potatoes of what you are looking to do with the funds. We'll review those LOIs and then invite organizations to a full application based on our review of their LOIs. And we'll talk a little bit more about that process in a bit. I will say we do review proposals on a regular basis. So if you submit November 21st, that will kind of start our review process. We don't wait until all proposals are received. So certainly if you're able to, applying early would be beneficial. And then when you do submit, you'll again go to that Spark Grant website, which is the link is shared here. There'll be a submit a proposal button and you'll be able to submit. So our grant committee is made up of our staff here at the organization. So we have our CEO, Phil Kim, our COO, Myra Lambera, and then myself and Kenya. And then Kenya will talk a little bit about how we incorporate community voices into our Spark Grant review process.
So we did reach out to other members in the space from the community that we have previously worked with. And we're very fortunate to have, to now have our Spark community advisors, which consists of Fabian Garcia, who's the Director of Government Relations for Homeboy Industries. We also have Gail Yan, who's the California Policy Director with Root and Rebound. Martin Leva, who's the Program Coordinator at Project Rebound with the California State University San Marcos. And finally, Nohelani Casperson, who's an undergraduate student at Cal State Fullerton.
And just to provide a bit more context, these individuals both helped us to shape our focus areas that Kenya shared earlier. And then we'll also be reviewing finalist proposals. And I think for us, it was very important to have individuals from the community kind of providing insight and guiding our decision-making process. So we're certainly very grateful that these individuals donated their time and energies to this cause.
Now going over a little bit the evaluation process. So once the letter of interest is submitted, the grant community, which is 20 staff, will do an initial assessment. Within 6 business days, all organizations will be notified if the proposal is moving forward in the process. And then once proposals that do advance, they will be asked to complete a full application. So if we really don't see any alignment with our focus areas, we wouldn't be providing you with an application. We don't want to waste, any organization's valuable time. So if we just know it's not going to be an initial fit, we wouldn't provide the full application. So once full applications are assessed and applications designated finalists will be reviewed by then the Spark community advisors. So those who do receive the full application and submit, then those will be reviewed by our Spark community advisors. From there, we may schedule a follow-up call with those that advance to the finalist stage if the grant committee requires additional information. And then you all will be notified of the grant committee decision within 6 weeks of our call for the proposals closing. I would say there's about, with previous statistics, 45 letter of interest that are usually submitted, and about 25% of those move on to the second round. So this is kind of an overview of the evaluation process. So once we receive the LOI, we either reject or move forward, and then the full applications will be sent out to those who have been accepted. From there, the Spark Grant community advisors review the finalists, and then if we need any further information from finalists, we have those one-on-one calls. And then finally, the final decision is made. So this should be about like a 6-week process.
And I'll mention, I think generally within each Spark Grant cycle, we look to fund 3 to 4 organizations out of that pool of kind of 45-ish or so that generally apply with an LOI. I would say 25% or so of those 45 LOIs generally advance to full applications. And then from those full applications, we generally see less than 10 advance to finalists that are reviewed by our Spark community advisors.
So I know there was a question in the chat about, if we see universities and community-based organizations the same. So we will talk a little bit about the past Smart Justice awardees, just so you all can get an idea of who have received the funding and the grants previously. So one of the organizations is Project Rebound. Project Rebound is a program that supports higher education and successful reintegration of formerly incarcerated individuals who wish to enroll and succeed at the California State University. Our grant is supporting a data-informed toolkit that aids their students in finding and guaranteeing housing opportunities with detailed knowledge of the challenges formerly incarcerated students face. Project Rebound will provide search tools for campuses to identify housing needs, ways to find and secure grants, how to establish off-campus partnerships, and other available resources. And in the near term, the effort will provide useful resources for Project Rebound campuses. We've also funded the Campaign for College Opportunity, which is an independent statewide nonprofit organization with a sole focus on improving higher education in California through policy solutions, public awareness, and engagement of a strong statewide coalition. And our grant supported the Possibility Report, which was a report that examines the barriers and resources for current and formerly incarcerated students that who face across 3 California systems of higher education. Last year, we also funded the Forestry and Fire Recruitment Program, FFRP, who provide career support to formerly incarcerated firefighters and currently incarcerated individuals who are interested in careers in the wildland and forestry section. Our grant supported FFRP in their expansion to the Bay Area, which was finally inaugurated a couple of months ago. Impact Justice is an organization that's committed to fostering a more humane, responsive, and restorative system of justice in our nation. Our grant did help launch the California Justice Leaders CJL program, And it's the first of its kind. It's an AmeriCorps program specifically designed for young adults who have been justice involved. Another grant was given to the RAND Corporation, which is a nonprofit institution that helps improve policy decision-making through research and analysis. Our grant was used to develop and publish an educational guidebook for correctional professionals that outline best practices and considerations for implementing high-quality college and prison programs. California Competes, which is an organization that conducts higher education and workforce policy research to bolster equity so every Californian can engage, contribute, and succeed. Our grant supported updating their California post-secondary to prosperity dashboard with disaggregated data related to incarceration. The inclusion of incarceration-related data will enable the state to visually identify and analyze broken opportunity pathways for incarcerated individuals, and it will uncover opportunities. The governor's office has used this prosperity dashboard in addition to a lot of other state agencies from across California. UCI Lifted, this program will lay the foundation for a new way of achieving decarceration in the state of California, moving us one step closer to the dream of allowing anyone from anywhere to educate themselves into a better life. Our grant supported a replicable demonstration project to establish the first University of California bachelor's degree granting program in a California state prison, an innovative pathway to higher education for justice involved students. They just started this fall last month. They just started the program, so very excited to see how our grant will assist these students.
Thanks, Kenya. I just want to quickly highlight some Spark grantees who are not based within our Smart Justice Initiative to, again, sort of give you a sense of the general work that we look to support. And then after this, we'll transition to Q&A. Again, if you do have questions, please drop them in the Q&A, and then we'll read them and do our best to respond. So Young Invincibles is an organization where we are supporting a student-led research project on what implementation looks like for a recent investment within the state of California. So California recently allocated $30 million for basic needs centers at community colleges. So this is within our Student Basic Needs Initiative. And what we're really interested in learning is what implementation is looking like, what best practices can be learned, and how can we share that across the community college system. I think having students lead the research work is a really exciting thing for us to support and allow students to be in a leadership role and kind of continue to build their skills while also having a large impact on the population. US Public Interest Research Group, or USPerG, is an organization that we funded with one of our earliest Spark grants. They drafted a report that looked at the textbook industry's new automatic billing practice, or often called inclusive access. From that report, there were numerous class action lawsuits filed. It's been cited in legislation. And really kind of set the stage for a swell of effort to sort of push back against some really predatory practices that the textbook industry is perpetrating on students. We partnered with Cal State Long Beach to support the development of a best practice for a family-friendly campus via their Pregnant and Parenting Students Initiative. So they're going to create a manual effectively of what is the best way to support a parenting student or a pregnant student at your campus. They're also working with the CSU Basic Needs Initiative to share out those materials. So it's the type of grant which we really love, where the work is being done on one campus, but other campuses are going to benefit across a system. And then the last grant that I'll mention is the Public Policy Institute of California, or PPIC. we supported research efforts to look at the digital equity gaps and looking at what that looked like in spring of 2020 versus spring of 2021, with the whole goal of sort of identifying for policymakers where gaps exist, what recommendations there can be, and informing policy through research, which is a strong area of interest for us. I'll hand it over to Kenya, who can talk a little bit about a webinar that we actually have coming up next week that we would love y'all's attendance for our Spark Justice initiative. I'm having a bit of trouble with the chat, Kenya, but I did Slack you the registration link. So I don't know if you're able to drop that in the chat for everyone.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you, Ryan. So we do have our best practices webinar next week. This has been a series that started back in September. So it's best practices it's California's best practices for students inside prison. We will be discussing what the best practices are in order for students that are currently inside prison so that they can be successful throughout their entire educational programming within prison, and so that they're able to be successful as they're transitioning out. We are going to be having two different panel discussions. The first one will be moderated by myself, and it's going to include Peter Folks from Saracoso Community College, Tai Griffith from Claremont Colleges, and Kevin McCarthy from Underground Scholars UC Berkeley. And the second panel discussion will be moderated by our fellow, Danny Murillo. And the speakers will be two College of the Redwoods Pelican Bay Scholar students. So they're going to be discussing, their current experience as taking educational opportunities, taking college courses while inside, and how that experience has gone through them. One of the students will also be sharing a really great poem that he has written. So it's going to be a really, really great discussion that we're really excited for everyone to be a part of. So again, that's going to be on November 9th at 10 a.m. and I will be dropping the registration link in the chat.
There we go. Awesome. Thank you, Kenya. Really appreciate you sharing about that. That reaches the end of our presentation. Here are our email addresses, very simple, ryan@20mm.org, kenya@20mm.org. We are always willing and interested in communicating with y'all prior to submission of an LOI. Oftentimes it provides very valuable feedback. So if you want to send us an email and say, hey, I'm thinking about this idea, do you all think that it's something that would be competitive? We certainly would provide feedback. Oftentimes it is oh yes, like please do submit. Here are some questions that we might have that might be helpful in kind of adding color to your LOI. The other thing that often occurs is, no, I don't know if that's quite the best fit for us right now. And then it kind of saves you all the time of actually building out that full 500-word LOI if it's just kind of a few brief sentences to us about the general idea. Also happy to hop on quick calls to talk things through if that is easier as well. So please feel free to reach out to us. So I'm going to turn my attention now to questions in the Q&A. Again, if you do have a question, please feel free to drop it in there, and then I'll read them aloud and then answer. Does your criteria for incarcerated include young people formerly in juvenile detention? Also, is Michelson expecting planning for future funding / opportunities for renewal under the Smart Justice Initiative? I'll take those questions, I think, maybe in reverse. So generally, we don't do any sort of kind of like ongoing funding for an organization. We're just limited in that capacity. We have had a few organizations that have received multiple Spark Grant awards. The one that comes to mind is FFRP, which I know Kenya shared about earlier. So initially, we had funded their growth and expansion within Southern California, and then we supported some expansion within Northern California. So that's an example of one, but generally we don't have the capacity to sort of provide ongoing funding for that same project that is occurring. I think one of the things that we see, and we kind of hope our dollars do, is seed interest from other foundations that have larger capacity, to say, oh, wow, 20mm gave y'all money to do this work, like, let's keep the ball rolling, and, X foundation is interested in contributing at Y amount. We're also very happy to facilitate conversations and introductions with other foundations. In regards to young people formerly in juvenile detention, I don't see any reason why that would not fall within our criteria. Kenya, I'll defer to you on that one.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, we were talking about multi-generational, it's one of our focus areas. So definitely, I think that falls under that. Would definitely be willing to look into that.
The next question, I am with a community college that has a foundation. I am with Rising Scholars Network. Do you fund these types of programs? Yes, definitely. We'd love to hear a little bit about what's going on at your school within the Rising Scholars Network, what work we may be able to be supported that is kind of focused on, or I should say centered on, our focus areas. I think, again, the one thing that I think I shared previously is generally we see more of the competitive proposals are ones that won't just impact one particular campus, but potential to scale across multiple campuses. So hopefully that feedback is helpful. Do you have a preference for funding concrete projects that will be concluded within the time frame you previously mentioned, 6 to 18 months, instead of a continuing program? I don't think we have a preference for one versus the other. I think that generally we probably see the former of kind of things that will conclude within the time frame. And I think the reasoning for that is kind of what I touched on earlier, which is we realize that this is a one-time $25,000 grant, so it might not be able to sustain ongoing programming. That said, if there is another funding stream that you all envision picking up the work or expanding the work after our Spark Grant cycle, or excuse me, our Spark Grant award, is used up, that would be of interest to us. So I would say certainly, share that information in your LOI if there's something where it's, hey, we're looking to prove this out, and then we're going to go after, let's say, institutional dollars or state dollars or other foundation dollars. And then Leanne, when will the next round of Spark grants for the Smart Justice program be? So this current round that we're talking about launches in November, November 21st. I hope I got that right, Kenya. And then it goes into the first week of December. We generally run our Spark Grant cycle on a quarterly basis. Quarter one of each year is focused on our digital equity work. Quarter two is focused on our open educational resources work. Quarter three is focused on our student basic needs work. And then quarter four is focused on our Smart Justice initiative. We also have certainly the ability to give out dollars outside of our Spark Grant program. I will say that that's fairly limited, and certainly wouldn't be able to probably occur, within the next 4-ish months. But we'd love learning about work that's occurring that maybe isn't a fit for our focus areas right now. So that way we can kind of expand our base of knowledge and potentially expand our work in the future. Those are all of the questions that I see in the chat now. I'll give it another minute or two if anyone else has any other questions. Repeat the focus areas by quarter, please. Yeah, so quarter one will be our digital equity cycle. That will probably be in late February of next year. Quarter two will be our open educational resources cycle. Quarter three will be our student basic needs cycle. And then quarter four, which obviously in this year and then also in next year, will be our Smart Justice cycle. So I'll give it, Are you only funding California programs? So we are funding organizations whose work will impact Californians. So if that work, impacts Californians, it could be something where, and I mentioned this earlier in the conversation, maybe you're doing work on the federal level that will have an impact in California, but the work isn't actually occurring in California. That's certainly something that we're interested in. So hopefully that answers that question. I don't see any other questions in the Q&A. So again, I'll just mention, please feel free to reach out to Kenya or myself. We're happy to provide any additional feedback in advance of the cycle launching later this month. And yeah, thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to reviewing proposals in a few weeks.
Thank you all so much.
All right, everyone have a great day.